like to use the region's land acknowledgement today. Essentially, we acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississaugas people, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgiana Island First Nation. It is on this ancestral and treaty land that we work, learn, and live. So we would like you to think about the traditional land you are currently situated on, and to join us in acknowledging and thanking the generations of indigenous people who have cared for these lands, and in celebrating the continuous strength and spirit of indigenous people. The ongoing work to make the promise of truth and reconciliation real in our communities, and in particular to bring justice for murdered and missing indigenous women and girls. And also to acknowledge the impact of residential schools on indigenous families across the country. And this is going to form the discussions we are going to have today and continue to have in the future. On Monday, we were privileged to have Maria Kick-Nosway to lead us in the opening ceremony. And we are looking forward to have her back at the end of the day today to lead us in the closing remark. On Monday also, we learned a lot from the candid conversations between Dr. Rachel Zeller and Hirot Melaku on their experiences on gender-based violence. Yesterday, we continue also by hearing from other women who presented to us. 4 amazing women: Abby Ajibolade, Sophia Zaran, Dr. Jacqueline Ben-John, and Debbie Owusu Aje. Today, I am asking you to fasten your seatbelts, relax for another incredible session with 2 amazing women who will take us through the arts, spirituality, healing, and embodiment. And it is a privilege and honor to introduce these 2 amazing women we are having today. Keisha Williams. Keisha Williams is a Toronto-born Black queer actor, director, model, and head promoter. Keisha focuses public health and digital media by creating socially relevant content that discusses health and promotes healthy sexuality, concept culture. Keisha directed their first short film, Red Leaf Cage for Black Girls, in 2010. In 2018, they co-directed their second short film called Queen of Hearts, winner of the 2017 Bravo Fat pitch competition, now gaining international attention. Thank you. We are happy to have Keisha today joining us. And the next amazing woman we are having to do work with us today is Ravin Wins. Ravin Wins is an African Bermudian Mohawk, two-spirit, queer, and transcendent individual. Ravin is a co-founder of A-Nana Diversity Dance Company, a queer multiracial dance company that aims to change the landscape of dance and provide accessible, affirming dance education to the LGBTIQQ2S community. Ravin is part of Black Lives Matter Toronto Steering Committee, a group who are committed to eradicating all forms of anti-Black racism, supporting Black healing, and liberating Black communities. Thank you so much, and welcome you all to today's forum.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone has had a good and restful morning. So thank you so much, Esther, for that introduction and for opening up the space for us to begin our work today. So as you stated, my name is Keisha and this is Raven, and we are presenting to you a workshop called Ashe. And the acronym that we've created for today is Arts, Spirituality, Healing, and Embodiment. Of course, Ashe means a lot of things. And one of them is its spiritual reference. Can be seen similar to the statement Amen, but essentially it means so it is, so it will be, and things along these lines in this nature. And we chose this title really because of the connections to embodiment that it has, which we'll get into a little bit later. But for now, we're going to start the session off with a short gratitude practice. I will start this time with you as I start all my time where I am in the public eye, just really focusing on all of the energies and beings and people that have come before me and that have worked so hard so that I can be here today, presenting to you, speaking to you, and so that we can have this moment together. So I want to say thank you to my direct ancestors, those that I know that I've experienced life with on this earth that have now passed on, that I know are wishing me my highest good and who are here with me today. I want to thank all of the beings and energies on the planet right now that allow me to continue to be here, eating and breathing. And I would like to also thank those beings that I have had the opportunity of teaching and learning with, primarily my 3-year-old. I thank you very much for all of the lessons that you teach me every day. I'd also like to thank all of the people who have brought us together today for this session. The organizers, for the interpreters, the technicians, the dreamers who, thought maybe we should do this, and then went ahead and did so. I thank you for your work. And I also want to thank Raven. I want to thank you sincerely for just all the ways that you teach me. For those of you, well, probably a lot of you don't know, Raven and I have known each other for quite some time, and I've been learning from you for quite some time. And I just appreciate all of the beautiful energy that you bring to this world, that you will bring to the session. And I'm grateful for all of the things that we will teach together today and in the past and also in the future. Ashe. And now, I'd also like to allow the participants in this session to also offer gratitude, either in your head, in your mind, on a piece of paper, but by you in the chat. Feel free, however you'd like to go ahead and give gratitude to those beings and energies that that you're connected to. So we'll just take a minute to do that. All right, thank you very much for joining me in that practice, and I will hand it over to Raven.
Great. Thank you so much, Keisha. I appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today, for being here for yourself, this moment, for this reckoning of uprooting white supremacy, in grounding ourselves in liberation, anti-Black racism, commitments to ending anti-Black racism and Indigenous resurgence. So before I begin what I will share with you, which is movement practice, a breathing and stretching practice, I want to acknowledge where I am right now, here in Takaranto in Free Fires territories under the covenant of the Haudenosaunee people and the Mississaugas of the Credit River, the Wendat peoples, the Anishinaabeg, the Métis, and Inuit Nunavut. So just want to take a moment to acknowledge that, as we are asked constantly to remember, to commit, and to grow. So I wanted to share with you a breathing exercise to get us centered in this conversation that we're going to have with each other today. For you to take stock of where you are in this moment on this particular Wednesday morning, afternoon, morning for some of you, evening for some of you. So I'm going to ask you to take 4 breaths. These breaths are for the 4 directions: north, south, east, and west. But also you can think of it as the first breath for yourself. Just to assess, where am I? How do I feel? How open am I today? No judgment. The second breath is for this virtual room that we find ourselves in, the people who have gathered here to partake in this conversation, this sharing circle. The third, for your ancestors, your guides, your spirits, who you pray to, who you honor. And the fourth is for your future, what you were dreaming and breathing into existence with your commitment and foresight. So I like to sit comfortably. So everyone sit comfortably if you're in a chair. I can't see everyone, but hopefully if you're standing or sitting, it's the same sort of feeling. I like to have as much space in my torso as possible so I can feel the full amount of air expel from my body. So we're going to take a deep breath in and a long breath out. A deep breath in and a long breath out. A deep breath in and a long breath out. The final one, deep breath in and a long breath out. Thank you. So we're gonna do some light stretching just to open up ourselves to this moment. I find that for me, activism is embodied. It is not solely intellectual. And the way that I do that is by sitting with my body, honoring it, holding it, stretching it, being with it. So I just want you to think about your ear and tilt it towards your shoulder. Great. And the other side, tilting your other ear towards the shoulder. And coming back. Then what we're going to do is again on both sides, ear to shoulder. And last time, ear to shoulder. Great. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to roll our shoulders up and to the back. Think of this as a tiny massage, just warming up the inside of your shoulders. Just do that a few times. Beautiful. And then we're gonna go the opposite direction. So rolling the shoulders forward, allowing just for a little bit bigger shapes so you can bring your elbows. Beautiful. Now, in a way that's comfortable for you, we're gonna interlock our fingers and then stretch through the top of your screen, just giving yourself a little washer machine motion, just to open up your spine. Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, I'm going to lead you through a little bit of a mindfulness meditation. This helps me as just a human being to connect to myself, understanding who I am in a moment, in a place, in a movement, in order to be an exceptional ally. You first have to understand like who you are in a moment and in a space. And I do that by this exercise. In modern dance, we use something called the four bodies. We go from grotesque to beautiful to animal to kitchen table self. And so the grotesque is the racism. It is the white supremacy. It is the grossness of what we are experiencing in this time period and have been experiencing over the past 600 years. And beautiful is the family, the community, the joy, the breath, the honey. And your kitchen table self is who you are when no one else is there, when no one else is watching you. What are the conversations that you have for yourself? It is that person who we need to connect with today, connecting to the very nucleus of who you are, so that that conversation involves revolution and change. And the animal self, connecting yourself as a human being, we tend to separate ourselves from the animal kingdom, but we are one and the same. And so we can look to animals to teach us about connection, community, family, trust, and healing. And so we go through these different bodies. So as I share the different body, I just want you to explore what that feels like. You can do that in your mind. You can do that with movement physically. I'm going to offer a physical movement that you can do while considering these, but feel free to stay unmoving if you are more comfortable that way. So I like to think of a wave. So allowing my ribs, if you can see, to go side to side, very gently, just side to side. But of course, oceans and rivers go side to side and front and back. So you can go side to side and front and back. Now I want you to think about grotesque. The reason why we're here today, the healing, the acknowledging and removing of gender violence. Now I want you to transition into the beautiful, the community, the family, yourself, your Blackness, your boldness. The animal self, community, family, honor, trust. And the kitchen table self, who you are when no one is watching, when there is no audience. Beautiful. Thank you. So we're just going to breathe all of that information that we just received from that exploration. Breathe it in and out, thanking ourselves for what we just allowed ourselves to open to. And opening ourselves up to what Keisha and myself will share today. And of course, you will share. So again, 4 breaths for the 4 directions of yourself, your own sacred body. Deep breath in. And a long breath out. Deep breath in. And a long breath out. Deep breath in. And a long breath out. Now I want you to draw this from the bottom of your toes. Deep breath in. And a long breath out. Beautiful. Thank you for going on that journey with us.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So we are now going to move on to the, I guess, I don't know, protein of this session. I was going to say meat and I was like, nope, tofu, nope, protein. That's the one. So essentially we are just going to talk a little bit about what we mean by embodied practice, a little bit about who we are and how we do our work. We are hoping that that's going to bring up some questions, and then we will go ahead and work through those. Before we get into questions, though, we'll share a little bit of our work in terms of how we embody our practices and our anti-racism, anti-Blackness, anti-Black racism practice. Yeah, and we'll take it from there. So this section is going to be a little more informal, I would say, between Raven and I, and we'll just speak as we see fit.
That's me, healing practice. So I am a two-spirit African Indigenous trans woman. And those intersections have forced me into a life of activism, fighting for my space outside of my body and inside. And as a dancer, which is my profession, I have a very embodied practice, which means I'm aware of when I'm holding too much or when I really need to release something, when my body is communicating to my mind, we need to take a break or take that extra 15 minutes of sleep. And so dance has been my gateway, my escape, my my muse, and has allowed for me to have deeper conversations with myself about what I see. As a choreographer, my job is often reflecting the world around me. As a burlesque performer, I utilize my identities, my glamour, my body to seduce my audience into conversations of activism, of Black liberation, of talking about white supremacy, and really digging into the parts of ourselves that perpetuate it. Talking about privilege and how it exists within our bodies, within our worlds, within each other. And privilege not being something we need to feel guilty for. Guilt doesn't solve anything. Guilt and shame are not useful. I feel like in order to take responsibility for the privilege that you have, you use it to offer to the people around you, to the communities beyond you, in order to create space so that everyone is rising together. So instead of this idea of moving up, we're moving across so that everyone is actually lifting levels, so that when we get to this abolitionist present, abolitionist future, it is full of everything that we have desired, and no one is left behind to scrape up what is left over. That's what we're existing in now. And so I use movement to do that. I am a direct activist, which means I'm on the front lines of Black Lives Matter Toronto. But my job actually, as part of Black Lives Matter, is speaking to families who have just lost family members due to police and state violence. And so a lot of what I do is human work, communicative work that is about connecting to people who need someone to listen to hear their stories, and to help in any way, in all ways that I can. But in order for me to be able to do that, I need to meditate myself into becoming an arrow, my indigenous ancestry. Because for me, an arrow is something that can witness and pay attention, can cut through, can be precise, but it's also lets the water run off the sides of it. So I'm not taking it in, I'm acknowledging it and witnessing it, so that I'm keeping myself safe as I'm doing this work. So as you start to enter into activism spaces, circles, conversations, having a self-care practice is necessary. And it's something that you probably already do. And so that's what I feel like is helpful for me in this time period of all the things, of all information.
Ashe. So we can move on to the next slide, which just has a little bit of artwork from me. So I'm going to start talking about myself and my practice. Essentially, I think that there are a few things that are relevant for this group to know about my experience, both professional and lived. I mean, it's all lived experience if we're real about it. But I'll share some of that with you. So Definitely, I would say I learned early on that art was a way that I could survive. And so I say that being someone who, is queer identified and Black identified and who had a challenging childhood in terms of those things. I really saw from an early age that art was a tool that I could use to communicate what I was going through, to have people listen and engage with what was going on in my life or in the lives of people that I cared about. And so that was really my access point to the arts. And it was a really, I would say, embodied art practice, because I was really just putting out art that I had to put out. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, point blank. Because of just all of the challenges that I was experiencing, art really saved me and allowed me to connect to other people who are going through similar things. And so I think that that is a really important piece that I bring to this work of health promotion, of public health, of work around violence against women and violence against feminized folks. Yeah, I just thought that, I knew from a very early age that art and survival and speaking up, fighting against this violence that we were experiencing, that art could help me to do that. So yeah, I come to you as a public health professional, as a consultant. I also come to you as a survivor myself of physical and sexual violence throughout my lifetime. And I bring all of these things, all of these pieces, all of these experiences into my practice. So, the last year, 2020, I mean, was so intense for so many reasons, for so many people. But one of the things that 2020 saw was this kind of conversation starting globally or in a more public way about anti-Black racism and violence, really terrible, brutal violence associated with how people were thinking and thinking about Black people, treating Black people in the world on all levels, not just police and not just in systems, but in our relationships, in our grocery stores, in our hospital rooms, in our doctor's offices, like everywhere that people are, and of course, Black people are, these issues exist. And so we started to talk about it through this public recorded violence. And, I know that it was a period of a lot of Black people were just like, what do we do? Like, what do we do right now? Because of course, we know that these things are going on, but it was all of a sudden just very in our faces in a way that we hadn't experienced before. And a lot of people were asking a lot of us in ways that we had experienced before, but I think in a really intense way where, there was just a lot going on for a lot of people. Just a moment, I'm gonna cough. I forgot to ask or to thank my daughter specifically for giving me this lovely cold from daycare. I'm grateful for that. Um, because, just spices life up a little. Yeah, and I guess colds are put in perspective when we're dealing with a global pandemic. Anyways, so I believe I was talking about last year and just how intense it was. And I definitely felt the need to create at that time. And so I came up with a few little works I wanted to, I think generally in my practice, I've been trying really hard to focus on rest and to focus on things that feed me, and to focus on things that are beautiful, but not difficult. for me to create. And so I've been playing a lot with that this last year, and came up with some beautiful collaborations with other Black femmes, other queer Black femmes, that were really just responses to what was going on and how we were feeling, and really just taking time to celebrate ourselves and our resilience. And yeah, really just like set the tone and set the stage, as opposed to having to be reactionary and just having to constantly deal with all of these questions and things and videos and news stories that were coming at us. And so I really had to just kind of go in a little bit, and then I was able to, create and be like, watch this, as opposed to like I can't talk right now, engage with this. And I do think also a lot of people at that time got that we had already done the work and that we were already embodying practice. And so a lot of times folks would, go onto my Instagram, for example, and repost things that I had posted a year in the past or 2 years in the past. And I also appreciated those moments too, because we've always been doing this work. And so those moments of acknowledging that we've always been doing this work were also very helpful. So I'd say that's how I got through the ridiculousness that was 2020, is just really focusing on my own artistic expression, checking in on my people, like Raven said, having those difficult conversations and just being with people and seeing people, I think was something that really helped me more recently in my healing practice. And these things are what helped me to create those bigger projects as well. So those like bigger pieces where I'm talking about some of those like difficult things that I'm tasked with making beautiful and having people engaged with. It's much easier when I have these little pieces all throughout my practice, where I can always constantly be healing and growing and connecting to my spirituality and my ancestors. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that. I wanted to show a little example of a work that I did in the summer of last year, I believe. Yeah, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I found a song, and it was a beautiful song by a woman named Janine, or a person named Janine, I'm not sure how they identify. And the song is called Call Yourself a Lover. And I thought it was a really beautiful example of how we can do a lot with a little. And so I am just going to share a little quote that she wrote about her particular song. And then I'll share a video that I created, which is basically just like a collage video. I've been doing collage poems lately. And so this is a little playful piece around that, where I'm sharing her song, and also some images that I thought were important and that I thought illustrate the issue. So I'm going to read this quote about the song, and then I'm also going to show you the lyrics. I thought it was very beautiful. And that was the main piece for a little work that I created. So Janine says, "This song is for the lives that have been lost and to encourage allies to speak up. I made it in 73 beats per minute in honor of George Floyd, who was born in 1973. I wanted to create a token that can continue the heartbeat that was taken away from him and many other Black lives. Streaming income from this song will be donated to Black Lives Matter organizations. I would like And then there's like a second piece down here. I would like to get everyone's face involved in this message so I can put a video together with everyone sharing the message of, if you look like me, stand up and speak up. Please send a video of yourself lip syncing to the song to callyourselfalover@gmail.com. I love you and stand with you. And I read that second part because I thought that it was also a really interesting and beautiful way to involve other folks in what she was doing. So yeah, it was just a really simple, couple minute video that I thought was beautiful and moving, and I wanted to, amplify it a little bit, and also to obviously insert
Black Femmes.
Oh, the rest of my Vimeo is playing. A nice little subtle plug. Y'all can check out my Vimeo after this. So funny. There's always room for joy and laughter in our work. But anyway, so yeah, it was just a really simple way that I could amplify a message. And, I was happy that, like, quite frankly, that a white person took it upon themselves to write this song and talk to other white folks. And, we need to be doing much more of this. And I think that, it's a flaw to think of anti-Black racism work as Black people's work, right? Because we didn't create it. And so in order for us to actually meaningfully change what's going on right now, we have to, I say we, but I guess not we, non-Black folks, have to come together and really do this very difficult and grotesque work of eradicating anti-Black racism. And so when I see people who are, taking this this grotesque issue that we're dealing with and creating something beautiful and meaningful out of it, I think it's very powerful and should be shared. So that is an example that I wanted to share with y'all from someone who is not Black, because I think, I could show you all my work, and it would be from my place. And so if you're not sitting or standing or lying where I am, then it can be difficult to think about, okay, like, how can I embody this change? How can I do this work against anti-Black racism? And the answer is there's so many ways to do that. And that really the first way and the starting point is with ourselves, right? And that's where we come back to embodiment. How are we actually doing the work and making the change? And how can we, forward these conversations and make change happen? If you're not an artist, that's cool. You can support art. You can support artists. If you're, wanting to amplify Black voices, you can support them with your money, with your art, with your time. There's so many different avenues that we can support each other in really real and practical ways. And I think that that's also a really important point when we talk about embodying, like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your breath? What are you doing with any of your resources, really? And how are you bringing forth the change that you want to see in this world? So yeah, those are a little bit of my thoughts for now. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to throw it back to Raven.
I would just add on to what was already so full. I feel like there's this understanding, right, that activists are monuments, and they are people of the past. They are Martin Luther King, they are Malcolm X, Coretta Scott King. Rosa Parks. But I want to ask you to consider that many of the people who we think of as heroes are human beings. You know, that seems like, of course they are, but the way that we treat them is that we think that they're created of something else. Like we can't possibly step into those positions, places, areas, or have anything to add to the conversation, and that's wrong. And I'll say that because I am an example of it. As a trans woman, I am not supposed to be leading a revolution. However, trans women have been leading revolutions for a very long time, right? If you know your history. But I fought myself. You know, I fought myself in feeling like, oh, am I the right messenger for this message that I have in my body? I know I have something I want to add to this conversation. I know I have something to offer my communities. But my voice is too soft. I'm not a speaker. I'm a dancer. You know, this is how I communicate. And so how do I, as a dancer, offer what I have? And so what I did was, Black Lives Matter Toronto was doing an occupation of the Toronto Police Headquarters. And I went down every morning and shared stretching classes, because my work is in harm reduction through movement. And so I was aware of the trauma that people were being faced with, because I could see it living in their bodies. And I just wanted to offer something different, something that will allow people to just move and breathe. And the thing that I want you to think about is I didn't expect anything from it. I didn't expect celebration, not acknowledgement. I just wanted to be a part of it and offer what I could from where my talents were. And so when Keisha was talking about there's many different ways, that's an example of that. As a dancer, I never thought that I would be leading a revolution, you know? But utilizing this brought me into this group of incredible individuals who helped foster my speaking and all that kind of stuff, and the rest is history. But really, what pushed me into it, what was the thing that pushed me into it was a statement that said, whether we fight or don't fight, we still die anyway. So why not fight? Why not stand up? Why not do something to make someone else's life better? You know, I said I will give up these lights that are created by the oil that poison our oceans and you know, all that kind of stuff. I will give all that up if it saves one Indigenous girl's life. I will do that, because that is what it takes for us to, and not just self-sacrificing, but to sacrifice forward. You are an ancestor, right? And so to think about yourself that way, and how are you going to be a good ancestor? Not an ancestor who's going to cause the people in your descendants some trouble, but the kind of ancestor that you want, the kind of offering that you're trying to make sure that our children, as Keisha mentioned, are being brought up in such a way that they are expansive in love, expansious and like trust and hope, and understanding and connectivity and history. These things are important and necessary. So if you're an educator, then there's so much to do within education. We can stop streamlining people into disabled classes and non-disabled classes. You know, we can stop that separation so that we are making sure that everyone is included. So many spaces are not accessible because it's an afterthought. It's not woven into the fabric of how we're raised or how our societies are built. And you can't do that within white supremacy, right? Which is why we have to uproot it, which is why this conversation is so necessary, which is why healing exists, It's because we have to heal and strive through these systems, multiple systems that hold us back. So something that I just want to offer, because these were the thoughts that I had when I was meditating on today's session. And these are the things that I say to myself. I'm not one of those people, I'm not a academic in any way. I'm kind of a person who just listens. I just listen and just learn from the people around me. And so this is what I've taken as my mandate. You are your own lighthouse. So stop waiting and looking for everybody else to do the work for you, to package it and make it comfortable for you. Violence should never be comfortable. You must fight the desire of apathy. As white people, it is imperative that you think about the ways that you are situated within white supremacy. You don't need white supremacy to be a white person, you know? Because white supremacy is a delusion that has been crafted for you against Black, Brown, Indigenous bodies. You must plan for a feeling and lean into it. And so if you want joy, if you want freedom, if you want liberation, if you want Indigenous resurgence, then you have to do the work and lean into that. Warm it by the fire of your own voice. So using your own voice to speak truth to power. Explore where you're doing daily violence and repair it. Whether that's in your families and how you're treating yourself. More importantly, you can't do outside of you what isn't inside, right? So if you're not uprooting white supremacy inside yourself, you can't create it outside. You can't be a backseat driver to your activism. So you have to get in the driver's seat, and the work begins with you. And you can't do it without uprooting white supremacy. And as white people, your job is to constantly check in with how you willfully, ignorantly, or purposefully participate in the delusion. And for African, Indigenous, people of color, and Black folks to no longer play the game of oppression Olympics, you know, because we have some responsibility to take in this conversation too, in the ways that we perpetuate each other's harm. And so it is in the everyday life of Blackness where we need your care, the everyday life, not just the moments in the summer or when someone dies. We need you to have a Black love ethic is what I'm talking about, that doesn't wait to celebrate us. And it's not an intellectual idea, it's a lived, intentional, and committed practice. Those words are by Sonya Renee Taylor. And for me, I feel like it's like a tattoo, right? It's permanent. It's a permanent choice to work with inaccessibility and to know that it's never ending. You're always learning. So stay teachable, so that you can learn from the people who are doing this work.
Thank you for that. Oh, so many gems, and some people are catching them and throwing them in the chat, so that was really lovely. The one piece I wanted to mention that's particular to, I think, the VAW sector, or a way that we can think about our practice. So I think that primarily there are a lot of things from the VAW sector that we can bring into our work around anti-Black racism, or that are really just inextricably linked. For example, you know, we have our saying, believe women, right? Believe survivors. And I can say simply, believe Black people, believe Black survivors, right? So many times the difficulty and the most pain that I've experienced is really just from people not acknowledging what I went through, not acknowledging, you know, for whatever reason, it's easier not to, or um, I'm not really sure what the reasons are. I can't even go there. But, you know, it's just so important and meaningful, just that simple thing of being believed, and being witnessed, you know, and being able to really genuinely witness and listen and acknowledge people in all of their full humanity, I think can take us so extremely far. And I think in terms of our systems generally, like it's very easy for us to be like, well, maybe it's not easy for some of us, but for some of us, it's easy to be like, prisons are not working, we need to shut them down. For some of us, that's easy, right? And I think that it's a harder thing to sit back and say, what are the ways that I police myself? What are the ways that I police my friends and my coworkers and the people around me? What are the ways that I have internalized a lot of anti-Black bull? Because I don't know if I can swear. You know? But yeah, it's just, it's
It's necessary.
it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's
You know?
a lot.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
necessary. Yes.
It is.
The other piece that I was going to mention, in terms of my own embodied practice, I just want to talk a little bit about my work as a filmmaker, and specifically my work as a Black queer filmmaker. I really feel that film is a place where we can play, and really create new situations and new surroundings. A Black femme filmmaker called Kara Keeling calls it a radical elsewhere that we are able to engage with and yeah, really spend time building. And I think that that is such an important piece of this work, and such an important piece that needs to be supported in meaningful ways, because it's such an amazing tool and an important tool to be able to really not only say like, this is what's not working and this is what we need to change, but this is what it could look like and this is what it could feel like. And I think that that is so important when we're talking about eradicating something that is so, I'm going to keep using the word that Raven used, grotesque. It's just, it's so important that we are able to use these beautiful tools to address such a difficult and challenging issue. Yeah, so that's what I had to say on that. Also a piece on allyship. Raven, you were speaking a little bit about this earlier. And I just wanted to add to that, you know, that not only is it permanent, but it's continuous. So, you know, that tattoo doesn't fade. You go get touch-ups. Like, you know, you put lotion in it, you keep it out of the sun or whatever you need to do to maintain the freshness of that tattoo. That's what you got to do, you know. And so every day, this is not my own thought. I can't remember where it came from. But someone recently said, your allyship, think of your allyship card expiring every day, right? And so it is this continuous thing that doesn't end. You don't, you know, go on Indiegogo and donate your $5 and you're done for the year, you know. There is, like, while that's wonderful and great and supports that project, there is so much work to be done, and there are so many ways that we can figure out how to destroy this system that doesn't serve any of us. well, I guess it serves some of us, but it also harms those people that it serves as well. So, you know, I don't think I need to argue the case for why
No.
white supremacy should be eradicated with this group.
No.
But yeah.
Yeah. So there was something that was in the chat just now that I thought was interesting. I kind of responded to it, and it was around you know, you can't. Someone mentioned how do we police ourselves, and I think what it's referring to is how do we hold ourselves accountable. I think policing is an inherently violent practice. History is important, and this is why I'm saying this. Policing was brought in to continue the project of slavery and indigenous genocide, right? And so those aren't systems of care. Those aren't systems of real accountability. Those are systems of punishment. And we know that punishment doesn't actually offer a change of opinions, of thoughts, of growth, of change.
Of circumstance.
Of circumstance, exactly. And so that's why we're talking about the abolishment of prisons too, right? This is related. It's kind of like the idea of out of sight, out of mind. And so we need to craft abolitionist systems of care. We see that right now within this COVID period of time where people are creating these COVID bubbles of people who they can be in touch with, people who they can be in relationship to, people who are getting people food and things of that sort. That's what we need when it comes to our accountability, and that it's done with love, centering love, which is why Black Lives Matter is as popular as it is because it started with a love letter, right? That is the history of the movement. And so it will always center and be with love. Policing won't do that. And so when you're thinking about how to be in better relationship to the earth, to the planet, to the environment, to each other, I think working to be okay to make mistakes in order to learn the ways to be better. We've had so much of the other thing that's going to take some time for us to unlearn these harmful behaviors, which doesn't mean I think you need to sit on your behind, but I do think it's an active practice, right? And so be kind to yourself in that practice and be kind to other people in that practice. Sometimes we shame people out of their journey, and we actually need more people who are on this journey of liberation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And if it's helpful, I can share an example, a practical example of the kinds of things that I mean in terms of policing ourselves or the police in our head. So this is just super simple example, not to do with racism or anything like that. I mean, obviously everything has to do with racism, but in this particular example, let's say we're eating dinner together and you say, oh, I can't have a second helping because I didn't work out today. So, you know, not only is that problematic on multi levels, it is an example of us policing ourselves. So saying like, oh, I can't do something because I said so, because of some rule that I made up for myself that, you know, I need to exercise and eat equally, which is of course not true. But these are the kinds of things that we will tell ourselves that are rooted in racism, rooted in sizeism, rooted in fat phobia, right? And we're saying to ourselves, we can't do this. And you might not think that that's incredibly harmful, but it can definitely be very harmful for yourself, for folks around you, you know, and really what you're telling yourself is that, you know, you can't love yourself in this way that you want to love yourself and care for yourself because of something that has been communicated to you externally. So that's an example. I hope that that clears things up for folks a little bit. Great, we're
Yes.
getting yeses in the chat.
Yes, I think we can move into questions and answers. I know a couple of people had them.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So what's this process here?
Do you want to pick questions for each other? I've seen some pretty nice ones.
Sure. I'm just looking at this document now with them.
We have such helpful organizers in the background who are
Yes.
compiling all of the questions so that we didn't have to go through 650 potential questions.
Some of them I did answer, but someone asked, can you elaborate on how you use dance and movement to seduce people into conversations about white supremacy? I'm a burlesque performer, like I said before, and so when I perform my performances on stage, I often include references to Black liberation movements throughout history, including ones that are happening currently. And I do that in so many different ways. And by choosing a song that might be fun, that gets people excited and happy, by costuming, by makeup, by whatever I can do to bring people into to bridge people's interest, then I get them to listen, and then I might be able to expand their truth, their understanding, their even their own expressions of how they impact people. And so that's how I've utilized my own I think gifts of seduction. Many people who grow up with gifts of seduction are called numerous names, and none of them are often
None of
flattering.
them good.
None of them are flattering. However, I feel like those are the people who actually create so much change. When we're talking about Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, we're talking about sex workers, when we're talking about so many people who have revolutionized our mind, our language, how we are with ourselves and each other. A lot of those people were called too much or too loud or too, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's in all those things that I utilize to actually bring people into my story. I have a soft voice and it actually makes people feel comfortable. I'm aware of that. And so by sharing my voice more, it gets people to feel comfortable. And then I give you a truth. I'm honest, you know what I mean? And so it allows you to accept maybe what I'm saying in a different way than you have before. That's what I found with the summer anyway. Yeah. So there's a question here about law enforcement, if you want to answer that, Keisha. So it goes, what can police officers do to assist with healing and repair of those systems?
Woo, big question. Big question. I will address it from a today, this moment standpoint. So what can police officers do to assist with the healing and repair of those systems? I would say first and foremost, that police need to hold each other accountable in moments where things are about to go left or wherever they're going, that police officers call each other out and hold each other accountable. There was a really interesting thing that I saw happen with the Capitol madness in the States. Essentially, there was a cop, several cops who were essentially testifying against other cops who were present, who were not on duty. So I thought that that was important for cops to be able to say like, hey, actually, we do have far right militia in our police force. And that's something that we need to talk about. So I definitely think that that's like a today, this moment, absolutely, police officers need to be doing that work with each other. Um, I I think just as our world is anti-Black racist, so is the police force and within the police force. So I think those things need to be addressed as well. Using another example from the Capitol, it was Black police officers primarily who were tasked with, fending off violent white racist mob. And so, those types of things, I think cops can do with each other. I think they also need to deal with the cops in their heads and why they believe that a system like this needs to exist in the first place, because I think that fundamentally it doesn't. But of course, that's a whole other workshop session. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. There's another question here that I think is fascinating. With the evolution of language that is surfacing, being brought into the mainstream as a result of identity politics and other rights movements, do you think it counts as policing when we correct guide folks to more progressive language? My answer is no. Just no. I think
I agree.
I think if my chosen name is Adam and you call me Andrew, that is not my name. That's the simplest way I can put it to you. And so you call people what they want you to call them. That's how you offer respect. And so feeling as though I think that the conversation of identity politics is often conflated with cancel culture, and they're not the same thing. Holding someone accountable for making sure that they respect your pronouns, and here's why. Because as a trans woman myself, who is not, who I do not have a gender destination. Does that make sense? My gender doesn't have a destination of I'm going to be this kind of trans person. I am fluid in all the ways that I exist. And it took a lot for me to claim she, her. And so for someone to deny that of me, if I've asked for that, is violent. And that's why we call it violence. Fat phobia is violence. And I think that even some of these, pro big movements, pro fat movements can be fat phobic, in that there's always a larger woman on the photo, and that's the only time that you mention body affirmation. It's like, why can't it just be like always, all the time, but we need to call things out as we see them. And we can do so in a way that's warm and caring, but not everybody is able to do that. When I'm experiencing violence, then I need to be respected in the way that I respond to that. I think that that's where policing comes in. When I am harmed and I'm telling you that I'm harmed, and you are telling me that the way that I'm sharing that with you makes you feel uncomfortable. That's white supremacy protecting itself, essentially. You can't be outraged and do nothing about it. You can't say you want to move forward, to have healing, to have connectivity, if you're not acknowledging the people who you're standing with. That would be counterintuitive to the movement that you say that you want to be a part of. Yeah, does that make sense? I'm pretty passionate about that one. I didn't mean it to, I wasn't attacking whoever wrote that. I was just
Didn't hear it like that at all. There are a lot of questions, folks. We're like, ooh, okay. So, well, this one's easy. We can share our social media context. I guess also now if we're sharing our social media context, I think it's a good time also to plug our Patreon pages, because that is one of the ways that we get our work done and that we're actually able to be supported in ways as well that are not specific. Sometimes, you know, people will say like, here's $1,000 to do this particular work. And sometimes you need more in the middle to get to that finished project, or to get a meal, or to do whatever we need to do as artists to forward our career, and as people to forward our lives. And so that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy being on Patreon, because I think it allows us a little bit more independence.
Sorry,
And
Keisha,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt you. For the interpreter, I missed the word that you were sharing. Why you enjoy being on what?
The system, or not the system, the platform is called Patreon. Is that what you mean?
Patreon. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Do you need spelling? Okay. Actually, if the tech folks can bring up our slides again, we have a slide that has that information, and that'll just be easier for folks to see as well. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so for folks who don't know, I'll just talk a little bit very quickly, but it is a way that people can support others, primarily artists who are making work and who, you know, the supporter wants to be involved in terms of knowing what they're up to or what they're thinking about. Sometimes I share work on there that is just for me. And people who want to know what I'm working on, but that I'm not going to share publicly. And so, yeah, I think it's a really great way to kind of continually show support. So the way that it works is you sign up, and then monthly you donate to that particular artist that you're interested in supporting. So it's like, you know, whatever you can, from like $1 to, I think, as many dollars as you want. But it happens monthly. So again, it's that conversation that we're having about permanence, right? And that allyship doesn't exist in a moment, but that it's an active practice. So I think that that is an important thing to mention in that particular way. I'm not plugging us because we you know, need the money, but because I think this is a really great way in which you can support our work and acknowledge the work that we do. That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you, Keisha, for all of that, handling all of that. There's a question here. What is it? What is a constructive way that we can call our allies out without creating a divide or defensive response to ensure we maximize the best outcome? You can't control the outcome, one. And so that can't be the goal. But I think when you are calling someone out, I would switch the language into calling them into a relationship of accountability as opposed to calling them out. I think leave the calling out to the communities of color. But I feel like when you're calling someone in, you are actually committing to a relationship with that person. So you have to ask yourself a question. Am I open to being in relationship to this person where I'm holding them accountable continuously, offering them feedback, offering them validation when their behavior shifts and changes? If that is not what you're prepared to do, then you shouldn't be calling people out because it's actually work. And it can be, it's necessary, but it also can be harmful and and just a way for you to shuck the responsibility to somebody else, you know? Yeah, so when I'm calling someone out and someone's asking here, I'm gonna group them together at this. Have you ever dealt with Black folks, family members, community members, friends that blame Black people for their own misfortune or oppression? Um, how do you deal with Black folks who have such attitudes, especially if they're individuals that may be close to you? So the first thing I think about is compassion. You gotta have compassion for everyone, even people that wish you harm. And I know that's difficult, but it is necessary. And like I said, start with self. How many times have you been harmful to people and maybe you didn't realize it? And someone said, oh, that hurt my feelings. You're like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean it that way. There are so many times that we are faced with situations that force us to have to survive, that so many people have survived a particular kind of way for so long, that their language may be harmful, that their thoughts around Black people might be in a sort of self-hating way because they believe in the delusion of white supremacy that if you just work harder, if you're smarter, if you are, you know, if you don't have mental health concerns, then you will get what you deserve. And the reason why people have more is because they deserve it. And as opposed to it being the of the world. And so people are often fight within their communities. People often fight within their families. These are things that happen within white communities too, right? As we saw at the Capitol in the US, those are white people fighting white people for, you know, and so you often fight who's closest to you because that's how power works, which is why I was saying that like offering compassion will give you more space for the people in your family to have their own journey. It might be like, you know what, you need to go on your own journey and figure this stuff out. Here's a book, here's a movie, here are things that you can read and pay attention to that can offer you a different perspective. You can't change people's mind. I don't think you can change people's mind. I think you can expand their truth. You can expand what they understand. Changing someone's mind actually requires for them to do that themselves. Yeah.
Awesome.
Wow, they're rolling in, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Healing practices.
Is there anything that's jumping out at you?
I like this question at the beginning. So I'll read it out. Thank you so much for highlighting the importance and care and healing in our work and in activist spaces. I'm wondering what ideas you have about creating structures of care and healing in spaces within community orgs and other groups so that care and healing doesn't depend on individual behaviors. So I can start with that one. I think this is a really great question, and I'm reading it out because I think it's great for us to focus on. I think that we have to kind of plan for and expect healing in our spaces, if this makes sense. So a practical example I can think of is I used to work at an organization that had a room with a bed and low lighting, knowing that sometimes folks are not going to feel well and might want to take a rest or be tired and might want to nap and not have to like leave work or sacrifice their income or whatever. And so I thought that was really a beautiful example of acknowledging that we're all human, right? Acknowledging that we all need to take a break and that we're not robots, and that even at work, you might just need 5 minutes, and that can make you feel better. There's also folks who, were disabled in that work environment, and we're able to easily ask for or take breaks, you know, in between meetings and things like this with no questions asked. So it's a really beautiful way to make sure that folks who are often marginalized in these workspaces or just spaces in general, that they're able to be expected and welcomed into these kinds of spaces like community organizations or groups. That's off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more, but Raven, do you want to jump in at all?
Yeah, there are so many creative alternatives to the ways that we are relating to each other on a regular basis, right? And so
I can shoot
it's
some
hard to make
examples.
it's hard to make them practical, but I just thinking about the spaces that I'm in. I'm my own boss, and so I create the space I want to exist in. And what I mean by that is like I want to feel like I can be angry and sad and frustrated and open and inspired and and rant. Um, and all that be allowed to exist with my intelligence, with my, you know, productivity or lack thereof. um, I think there's so much of ourselves that we have to leave out, you know. I'm in a process. Here's a practical one. I'm in a process, a dance process, and it's the very first time that I've been in a dance process where um, the some of the artists are actually mothers of young children, and those children are often in rehearsals, and we make space for those the children's needs, which means we make space for our own needs. We allow joy to enter our workspace. We allow people to be parents and to be artists at the same time, because that's such a thing of separation. I think when we're constantly having to separate these parts of ourselves, that's when we become, um, or at least for me, that's when it becomes stale and stagnant, and I burn out. Um, I think I resist burnout by constantly generating new ways to be in relationship to the people who I'm working with. So whether that's offering more care, taking more breaks in a meeting, offering people to be off camera for a day, making it possible for people to ask for what they need, and for that ask to be respected and honored and not questioned. You know, so many people are afraid to ask for what they need because it's going to be judged or questioned. So again, it falls back to giving people space to exist in real um, and powerful, necessary ways, you know?
Definitely. During the first lockdown, I remember we had kind of like grocery plans for folks who couldn't get around or who had kids and things like that. So, you know, just like that practical support, I think is just so important, and being able to like, you know, like, okay, we know how to make a phone tree for those folks who are old enough to remember what phone trees are. And like, maybe we can create something new and different that allows all of our needs to get met. So definitely, I think that just actually being with people as you're working with them can just go such a long way. Like check-ins go such a long way, you know, those kind of simple things that we can just like put into the infrastructure of our organizing and relating to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to offer clarity because someone asked a follow-up to a question that I answered, which was just so I'm understanding your point about committing to the work, about calling people in. If we do not have the energy or simply don't want to do the work, could we not send them in a direction where they can do the learning for themselves? Because when I hear this, it sounds to me that I have to be their caretaker, and they are the ones who have shown that they need to do the work. Okay. I understand that in many different ways. And dependent on how you identify, this answer is going to feel different to you. Because as a Black woman, I always feel responsible for taking care of everyone all the time before myself, right? That as women of color, as femmes, and non-binary people, there's just a way that we are expected to do a lot of that caretaking due to white supremacy again. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to be someone's caretaker. I'm saying you have to be responsible for what you're asking someone else to do. And so saying, hey, you did this and it's effed up, I want you to read this book. If someone said that to you, would you read that book? Probably not, right? And that's what I mean. It's like, if that's not how, if you wouldn't respond well to someone calling you out and not offering you an opportunity to speak to it, to grow outside of it, to shift and change that behavior, then what do they do with the information? All they know after end of this is that they've effed up and they don't know what to do about it. You know what I mean? And so that's what I mean. And so for me, I have gotten in the game. I'm literally a part of a team that does this work on a regular basis, 24 hours a day, meetings, media, trying to figure out COVID relief, trying to talk to mayors and premiers and MPs and all these people about Black liberation, Black needs, Black healthcare, in these white supremacist institutions that are the very reason why we have to do this work, right? And so I'm calling it out all the time, but I'm also offering so many creative alternatives. When we say we're defunding the police, we're reallocating funds. We want them to reallocate funds to shelters, to community support workers, to social workers, and not just social workers, but people who work within communities, within families, to offer systems of care that are proven to work, as opposed to policing, as opposed to incarceration. That's kind of what I mean in terms of calling people into a process, understanding that it will be a process for them to shift and change that behavior. But I am a very protective person of myself. So if someone said, oh, you messed this up, do some work about it, I'd be like, no. You know, and that's just the truth, right? That's just the honest truth. And that stuff I have to uproot within myself. That's why I'm saying we all have to work to do. But that's my honest response, right? Because I don't know you, we're not friends, we're not family. You know, if Keisha calls me out, then it's different, right? Then I have to listen and I pay attention to that. If someone who I am in relationship to in a really intimate way says, hey, this is harmful, then I'm gonna do that work. But if it's some person who I've never met, who is not related to me, who might be a Facebook friend of 100, I don't really have a reason to respond, right? But if I say, hey, I'm calling you in to this conversation because I think what you did was harmful. Here's how it's harmful. And here's what I think that you can do to remedy that. It doesn't mean you need to be there for them during that period of time, but if they're in your family, right? Because someone asked about their family, then there's a different thing, right? Some people walk away from families. I did. But then I have a chosen family and I'm a relationship to them too. And they mess up, I mess up. And so we still need to do the work, whether with our bio family or not, right? And so that's why I mention it. Hopefully that offers more clarity.
Mm-hmm. So we have a minute. I don't know if we can answer one last question in a minute, but there is a nice question about our future expansion in the arts. So what we have coming down, which I think might be interesting for folks to know.
Sure. I am working on a memoir. And so I'm putting a collection of my stories together. It's a mixture of a memoir and a femifesto. sort of a call to action, but also like how I got to this place in my life. So that's what I'm working on. I'm also working on an album because, like I said, I'm an artist, dancer first, and so trying to create a soundtrack that is my thoughts on the world, just what I think, how I feel, and how I move through that. And so those are two projects that I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about. But also with Black Lives Matter, we are reopening our COVID relief fund soon to offer more care to folks who are still struggling in this time period. So look out for that campaign as we will put it out soon.
I am excited about your book. Let me know when I can pre-order that. I am working on film right now. I'm primarily a director and an actor. So I'm working on a short right now that is supposed to shoot, hopefully, COVID willing, in March. And that is about a criminalized mom who is attempting to connect with their child. So again, an example of me kind of dealing with some of these issues that we are talking about and dealing with in our real lives, and, you know, addressing it in our collective imagined reality and creating new things. So there's that coming up most immediately. And I'm working on a couple of other larger film projects that are sci-fi and Afrofuturist and exciting. And I think that that brings us to our time. I'm so grateful for you all being here with us. There is a little bit more in terms of what the session has for you, but in terms of our speaking parts, this is where we're wrapping.
Yes. Someone asked for resources for calling people in, and someone put it in the chat. Rania writes .com workshops. Rania is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, yeah. So thanks for having us today. Thank you all for being with us. Actually, can I just close something out? Can we just take 3 breaths? Because I opened the circle with you and I just want to be able to close that.
Yes.
So deep breath in and a long breath out. And deep breath in and long breath out. Last one, deep breath in and long breath out. Ashe, miigwech to our interpreters, Joanne and Christopher. I really appreciate you doing this work with us today, and everyone who's part of the Learning Network. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Ashe.